They are hands down the greatest writing directing team in the world. Of course, I'm talking about Joel and Ethan Coen, the Coen brothers, and we're extremely pleased to have them with us today to discuss their new film, No Country for Old Men. Howdy. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, senior editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, and man, did we get lucky. Thanks again to the fine folks at Miramax for making this happen. Joel and Ethan Coen, they always have a unique voice in their work, even when they're adapting someone else's work, which is the case here with No Country for Old Men, which is based on the novel by Cormac McCarthy. Although they are completely reverent to McCarthy's novel, it does still feel like a Coen Brothers film. Of course, don't forget to keep an eye out for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, which you could find at any Barnes & Noble and Borders bookshops and newsstands around America, Canada, and of course in Western Europe. If you want to find out what's in our current issue, definitely stop by www.creativescreenwriting.com to check out all the details on our latest issue. But now, without further ado, let's jump right into the posh hotel room in Beverly Hills where we got 20 minutes of sit-down time with Joel and Ethan Coen, the writing and directing team of No Country for Old Men.
We write the screenplays, but we're not creative.
No, you are.
You're sure we should be in this magazine?
I beg to differ, sir. I beg to differ. A lot of people are curious.
Is this a problem for the podcast?
Take a magazine, kids.
All right. Is this a problem for the podcast?
No. I'll just keep doing that right by the mic. All right. Your habit. People are curious how you guys write together. I've interviewed a lot of writing teams. What's your process? Are you guys in the same room? Do you email back and forth drafts?
No, we're in the same room. We go to the office in the morning conscientiously, which is not to say that we work conscientiously, but we're there so that if the spirit moves us, we can work. We sit in a room together and talk the scene back and forth. We kind of write it all together. We don't like trade drafts. But here's the thing about creative screenwriting is the most important aspect of it, and it's, I think, somewhat neglected, is most of the time that we spend writing creatively, we're actually napping.
Yeah, a lot of napping.
We do a lot of, for years and years, we would go into the office sort of religiously every day at, 9 or 10 in the morning and spend most of the day there. And my wife would accuse Ethan and I of essentially going in there and sleeping, and we would deny it. But about 2 years ago, we decided that it was time to admit that, in fact, that is what we do most of the day. So
I've actually interviewed a lot of writers that have been telling me that lately. I don't know why. What do you find that it helps you solve a writing problem? Like you sleep on it and it just kind of comes back to you?
No, we just find that we get tired.
Okay.
As you get older, your sleep becomes more important.
Talk about the importance of outlining in your writing process.
We don't do it. We never do it. We haven't done it. We don't do it.
Okay. So on most of your scripts that are original pieces of work, you don't know where you're going, your beginning, middle, and end?
Correct.
By the way, is your phone ringing?
It is,
okay.
Yeah. I decided to ignore it.
Good. But so you don't outline. So how do you know where you're going? I mean, do you know your beginning, middle, and end on an original work?
We don't. We read something, I can't remember who the quote is from, that enormous does, enormous does? That influence does. Yes. That enormous does influence. See, that's an example of creative, some sort of syntax. That enormous does influence Lee. Somebody said that if the author doesn't know where the story is going, the audience can't possibly know.
I like that. That's good. How many hours a day do you guys spend writing?
You mean when we're awake?
Yes, when you're awake.
It's not very much, actually. No, they're pretty easy hours. God, kind of 10 to 5. 10 to 5. We have long lunches,
You have a great sense of ensemble writing in all of your films. Do you do on character-specific passes so that each character speaks in a unique voice? Is that something that helps, or is it just not that conscious?
Oh, no. No, we don't do that. Whatever that would be. That's kind of a strange concept. It's strange that people do that, but people do all kinds of things.
Talk about your process for dialogue, because, I mean, that's another thing you guys are really known for. Do you talk it out together, since you have the benefit of being a writing team? Do you record it, play it back? Talk about writing dialogue.
We've never recorded it. Except, orthographically. Yeah, but we do talk it back and forth, talk a scene back and forth. Yes.
Some specific pieces of dialogue I want to talk about just briefly. In Raising Arizona, everybody kind of says, well, okay then. Where did that come from? Was that something you found just in the area by visiting, or?
No, actually, we hadn't been in the area until we went there to shoot the movie. I mean, the area specifically in Arizona.
Well, that actually brings up another. We don't do any research either.
Okay.
We won't visit an area. We write out of complete ignorance, really, and essentially make it up. A lot of research gets done sort of after the fact in production by the art department, the costume department, the production designer, that sort of thing. But we're not big on that.
You guys, I mean, you really have
more from the make it up school,
and that's good. It works. It works for you,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Your knack for dialogue, I think, one of the greatest moments you guys wrote was the John Turturro monologue in Miller's Crossing. Could you talk about shaping that? How'd you know when?
Can you remember it?
I mean, if you can remember it, you just don't?
Which
monologue? When he's begging for his life in the forest.
Yeah, that.
It's an amazing monologue. Was it always part of your original plan, or did it just kind of come to you as you were writing? Since, as you said, you don't outline.
I don't remember writing that specifically. I remember the process of writing the movie, which was really long. It took us a long time.
It was one of the longer ones, yeah.
Why do you think that was? Was there something that was blocking you?
It was sort of a complicated plot, and at some point we lost ourselves in the miasma of the plot, and I remember at one point putting it aside for a while. We wrote it over a summer. We wrote the first 40, 50 pages over a summer and then put it up. But that's actually something that we've done on a number of things where we've written maybe 30, 40, 50 pages of something and then set it aside. I remember on Fargo, for instance, we wrote all of Fargo up until the line where it said in the script, fade in Shep's apartment.
Carl is
humping the escort. That was the last line on the page, and every few weeks we'd come back and look at the page and it would say, fade in Shep's apartment, Carl is humping the escort, and we didn't really know where to go from that, and it sort of stayed there, just that, and then a white, blank page for the rest of the, that was it. And at a certain point, I don't know what broke the log, what was the sort of, what broke the dam there.
Yeah.
But I remember that being a place where we had sort of set the script aside for a long period of time, then come back to it and somehow figured out where to go from there. I think the solution was that we had Shep come in and kick the escort
out of him.
Beat the shit out of him and kick the escort down the hallway.
With a belt, I might add.
Yeah.
You writer's block. You wrote an entire movie about a writer struggling with writer's block and Barton Fink. How do you guys battle writer's block when you get it?
Take 2 aspirin and go to bed. We
actually, in the middle of writing Miller's Crossing, where we were just kind of sick of dealing with the plot, we wrote Barton Fink in a space of about, that we wrote really quickly in a space of about 3 weeks. So actually, that's how we deal with it. If we get stuck with something, we put it aside and turn to something else.
It's not uncommon that we'll work on, in some, work on it is maybe glorifying it a little bit too much, but we'll turn to something else in the middle of writing some other screenplay, just in order to think about something else when you get stuck at a certain point. That's good
advice.
Yeah.
Ethan, you weren't officially credited as a director until 2004's Lady Killers. There were perceptions back and forth that you might have done some directing. It was never clear.
There were rumors.
Yeah, there were rumors. But now you are credited as a director.
And the funny thing is, now that he's credited, he doesn't actually do any directing.
Well, explain that. How does that work as co-directors? Do you guys divvy up, I'm going to take one scene, I'm going to take the other? How does that work?
No, it doesn't. Actually, it's always been pretty much the same in terms of how we actually work. And, it actually comes out of writing. We kind of... writing the script is the process of figuring out and refining your ideas about what the movie is going to be, and that just becomes progressively more kind of specifically thought out as you're, making the movie, directing the movie. Certainly distinctions between us in terms of what we do have been totally artificial in terms of the credits, and they're even artificial in terms of,
But you are
writing as opposed to directing, or even you can make a case, directing as opposed to editing, which we also do, the two of us. We kind of.
Although we don't take credit for that.
Yeah, to make it more confusing. We just kind of, I don't know. The process of making the movie together that's what we do, and then you got to kind of figure out what to do with the credits.
But there isn't like you take a specific scene and you try and direct it or anything like that.
Oh no.
Okay.
No.
I think the Tavianis do it that way.
Yeah, so we've heard. They actually like alternate days or scenes or whatever.
Which is interesting that you can actually stay home for a day.
You guys are just
You're
starting.
thinking about napping again.
Yes, exactly.
You guys are just starting to adapt. I mean, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is adapted from Homer.
Yes.
Cuba
Yeah,
Libre
sure.
and To the White Sea, which haven't been produced, were adaptations.
Yes.
This is now an adaptation from a novel. Earlier you said you don't use an outline. Was having a novel as your kind of spine of your story a good start on the adaptation, or what changed about your process for writing an adaptation?
Well, it's interesting. It does help to have a novel as the sort of, the plot is basically there. It's interesting that with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, it wasn't until we were maybe, halfway through with the screenplay that we realized that we were writing the Odyssey. That was, in fact, it wasn't sort of a conscious decision to
That's very true.
adapt
We
the
realized,
Odyssey.
we got this guy. It started the idea started with these three dopes escaping, chained together, a chain gang escape movie, which it's a time-honored genre. Then we realized, since the guy was trying to get home, George Clooney's character was trying to get back home on a long and arduous journey, that it was the Odyssey. So we kind of tarted it up once we were conscious of it, with
sort of
specific references to
Who
the Odyssey.
knew we were adapting the Odyssey?
But
It made
now
us
on
feel
this
good about ourselves.
on this book, how reverent would you say you were? Invention's always a part of adaptation. Do you want to tell us about a scene or a sequence that you're really proud for inventing, adding on to Cormac McCarthy's work?
Well, we didn't really. In this case, honestly, the process of adaptation was more one of editing out things from the novel, because you can't do the whole novel in a 2-hour movie, rather than adding stuff. I think.
As always, we tried to keep invention to a minimum.
Okay.
Yes.
The scene with Tommy Lee.
Let Cormac do the inventing.
Yeah.
The scene with Chigurh in the gas station. It's,
no, that's in the novel. Almost probably word for word, I would think.
It's a fantastic scene. How did it look on the page? How did you know how long to make it? Because it's excruciating to watch, but the suspense is excellent.
I think, if anything, it's a little shorter.
Yeah, we did.
Really?
We
Okay.
cut a little of
Yeah,
it. It's
then,
a little. Yeah.
Some people were asking after the screening that I had seen your film in, which I loved, that Tommy Lee Jones, he enters the motel room towards the end that Chigurh's in, and there is a cut of Chigurh hiding.
Yes, there
but
is.
He clearly
gets out of the room.
He clearly seems to be out of the room by the time Tommy Lee is in there, or is it that Chigurh's in there and decides to let Tommy Lee live?
Well, that's
Yeah,
right. Sort of in.
Because the window's closed
Yeah,
in
that's
the bathroom.
sort of intentionally ambiguous there. That actually is a little bit different from the novel, where the Bell character is at the door, and then he leaves and drives around the corner, essentially to let, in case there is someone in there, to let them go. That's sort of the idea, and he calls the local police, and when he comes back with the local police, then Chigurh is gone. But we modified that a little bit, because we felt that if we did it as it was written in the novel, you wouldn't be able to sort of escape the implication or the feeling that the reason he was leaving was because he was afraid to go into the room, which isn't exactly what that scene was about in the novel, but we felt was going to be sort of unavoidable if we shot it that way in the movie.
Theme is really hard to write, but it seems like the theme of the movie is really summed up in the scene right before that in the diner with the sheriff and one of his colleagues discussing the violent ways of the world. How conscious of theme are you when you write it? Or when you write a scene like that? Because, it's dialogue heavy.
That scene, again, was taken from the novel.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, although it's from one of the monologues, it's actually all this stuff. About
Yes,
kids
that's
with-
right. No, that's right. You're right.
It is taken from the novel, but kind of put into.
That's right.
It's a weird exercise in adapting the novel. A lot of the novel is interior monologue of the sheriff, of the Tommy Lee Jones characters. and we kind of dumped a lot of it, but put some of it in a kind of dramatic scene context, that scene being one of them. Where were we?
We were talking about
theme.
Yes.
Theme. Well, I don't theme.
Yes.
Theme.
All right. We're gonna move on. The decision not to show.
You got lost there. And
I'll bring you back.
Yeah,
Yeah. The decision not to show Moss's death, I found very interesting.
Yes.
Talk about that. Was it?
Well, again, that's from the novel. He dies off stage, as it were.
Okay.
Yes, it's striking. I mean, it was striking in the novel, maybe even more so in a movie, because it's even more unusual in a movie to have what seems like the main character be killed not only off screen, but by somebody who's not the bad guy, by actually just a bunch of nameless schmoes, which is also from the novel.
Killed by nameless schmo.
What's the point of view? There's a point of view change. There's a point of view change in which we're tracking Bell, Moss, Chigurh, and obviously the Woody Harrelson character.
Yes.
How did you guys handle those changes? Changes in point of view.
Again, that was what was, I have to say, very interesting to us about the novel, the way the novel worked, and something that we tried to preserve in the movie, or at least find a way of doing. It's not done exactly the way it's done in the novel, perhaps, but we tried to find a sort of analog to it in the movie, where you're following one story for a while, and then you follow another. That's very much like the novel. The other thing that was interesting to us was the idea that you sort of go through the principal part of the movie, most of the movie, sort of tracking with one character as sort of the center of the movie, the Moss character, and under the impression that this is really who and what the movie is about. And then, as in the novel, you reach a point where that character disappears, and you have to sort of ask yourself, okay, well, if it wasn't about him, and then what is it about, and who is it about? And that's what we tried to do in the movie as well.
You guys have always had a skill for capturing kind of darkly macabre deaths in your films. Even in Fargo, there's kind of the foot in the wood chipper. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of laughter, even though it's sick and disgusting. But there's definitely a change here in which death is absolutely, completely vulgar, brutal, horrific. Talk about that decision. I guess it's probably more directorially how you handled it, in which there is very little tongue-in-cheek about this movie. It is. Well, I think
there is humor in the movie, and actually there were aspects of the book that I found very funny. There's a sense of humor in the book, a very interesting one. But I think in the movie, and this is a difference between reading a book and watching a movie, that some of the laughter that you hear in a movie theater is, this is almost obvious. It's the nervous laughter that's sort of the release of tension during very sort of tense or suspense moments.
Sure.
So I think it's sort of a combination of those two things, where you have, the humor that's there in the book and this sort of nervous laughter that comes out of the sort of suspense nature of the movie. You were talking about the violence being more sort of brutal or realistic or vulgar or brutal or whatever you want to call it. I think that that's really again, that's very much sort of a part of the novel also. There's not.
So it's just part of your adaptation process.
It's not a comic book kind of violence like there are, and it is in certain movies or even certain things that we've done. Right, it's a little bit different in kind, the nature of the violence. I think that's fair.
But there is something, I don't know what you call it. It's not funny exactly, but people laugh, and it's not just a nervous thing. I don't know what it is. People laugh, and Javier picks up in the motel. Javier picks up that gun with the badass gun with the big silencer on it, and then he picks up the cattle gun.
Right. Or just the image of Javier walking with that cattle gun, that cattle apparatus, is in itself both a horrifying image and a comic image. It's interesting that it's the visual thing.
Yeah.
It's not you don't have that reaction in the novel.
No. Although the whole conceit of the cattle gun
is amusing,
right?
But you don't have the actual physical laughter of the image,
Right.
the image engenders.
But it's kind of the same thing because it's kind of a reaction to the outrageousness
of it.
It's outrageous, but it's not wrong. There's something funny about it.
Right, that's true.
I love you guys' work. I can't wait to see what you do next, and thanks a lot for your time.
Okay.
All right,
Great.
thanks, man.
Great.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Thanks again to the fine folks at Miramax for making this Q&A happen, and of course to Joel and Ethan Coen, the writing-directing team of No Country for Old Men, based on the novel by Cormac McCarthy. If you dug this episode of the podcast in general, consider tossing a virtual tip into our PayPal virtual tip jar by visiting www.creativescreenwritingmagazine.blogspot.com and look for the PayPal icon. Your tips are appreciated and definitely help out with equipment, hard drives, and all the other stuff we need to keep this podcast running. Of course, feel free to check out my blog, which I even managed to update on the rare occasion that I have time to do so by visiting www.jeffgoldsmith.blogspot.com. You can also always feel free to drop me a line by emailing me at yo.goldsmith@gmail.com, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you as soon as I can. Of course, don't forget to click that subscribe button in iTunes or your podcatching software because that's how episodes are downloaded automatically every time you click refresh. And if you have a minute, feel free to leave us positive feedback in the iTunes Music Store or at podcastalley.com. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, thanking you again for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.